Good evening, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the side event of the Least Developed Countries Expert Group. My name is Kenel Deluska from Haiti, and I'm the chair of the leg. I will be your moderator for this event. This event is being streamed and will be available in YouTube after. So please allow me to also welcome our virtual audience. The leg organized side event during the SB sessions to discuss the experiences and progress made by the least developed countries in addressing adaptation and the support provided by the group to the LDCs. We are therefore delighted to have you here with us as we present our updated vision and strategic activities addressing the priority needs for support of the LDCs. We also provide updates on additional mandates from COP26, such as the draft rules of procedure. The side event will also give space for the operating entities of the financial mechanism to provide updates on supporting the LDCs with funding in formulating and implementing the NAPs. We will hear country reflections on success stories, experiences, and challenges with the formulation and implementation of the NAPs. We will also hear from relevant organizations on their experiences in implementing adaptation projects in the LDCs. We will then have a general discussion at the end of the event. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I have the pleasure to invite Ms. Madeleine Diouf, LDC Group Chair, to give us welcoming remarks. Chair, you have the floor.
Thank you, Kenel, Chair of LEG. On behalf of the LDC Group, I am pleased to take part in these events organized by the LEG to discuss the experiences and progress made by this developed country in addressing adaptation and the support provided by the group to the LDCs on adaptation. As a group which constitutes some of the most vulnerable countries to climate change, the work on the leg is supporting us is really important. As a group, the LDC consider effective implementation of the Convention and the Paris Agreement as critical to ensure we achieve their objective. In this regard, the work of the leg has been critical in supporting the group in meeting its obligation under the Convention, the Kyoto Protocol, and the Paris Agreement. The leg has supported LDCs in developing National Adaptation Program of Action, NAPA, to respond to urgent adaptation needs, and currently to the process to formulate and implement the National Adaptation Plan, but address the medium to long adaptation need, as well integrate adaptation in the development planning process. The support of the leg has been provided through capacity building initiative, including the development of good practice guidelines. Particularly, the support of the leg has been valuable through the Open NAP initiative, aimed at mobilizing different experts to assist countries produce quality and timely NAPs. In addition, the guidance of the NAP Technical Working Group has been beneficial to the technical work in formulating NAPs through the work of the LEG Technical Working Group. Most sustainable solution and recommendation were being identified. The group of LDC would like to show his appreciation for the outcome of the 41 meeting of the LEC held in Nairobi, which focused on critical topics, including progress in implementing his activities for 2021 to 2022, the integration of gender perspective into his work, the development of his new work program for 2022 to 2023, the LDC's priorities and need for support, the status of the process to formulate and implement NAPs, and the implementation of adaptation project identified in National Adaptation Program of Action and related strategy and plan. We hope that the outcome of the assessment from the 41 meeting of the LEG will allow to expedite support, with particular focus on LDCs that are lagging behind in their NAPs formulation, to ensure that all LDC urgently finalize their NAP and move forward to implementation. Delivering on NAPs will assist LDC to effectively build resilient society and ecosystem. Technical support should focus on creating sustainable solutions in LDCs. The LDC group hope by associating the operating entity of the financial mechanism of the convention, namely the Adaptation Fund, the Green Climate Fund, and the Least Development Fund under the GEF, and other partners to these events, and the work of the LEG more generally, will increase finance in the implementation of NAPs in LDC's countries. So far, the current support has focused more on formulation of NAP. So there is more need for support to bring accessibility to the implementation of NAP, but also to bring support for policies implementation related to adaptation and related also to climate mainstreaming. Parallel to developing NAPs, the LDC should be supported in developing bankable projects, and I think the LEG is already starting this support, and we encourage him to continue doing so. Finally, I wish to indicate that priority gap and need varies among the LDCs depending on their country-specific circumstances, and therefore it is important for the LEG to take this into account and to provide the support for any LDC's countries. I thank you for your attention, and thank you also for inviting me to be part of your side events.
Thank you, Madeleine. Thank you, Chair of the LDC Group, for the good words, and also we hope to maintain the wonderful relationship we have with your good office. And we took note of most of your recommendations, and we think also that it's of paramount importance to put emphasis on NAP implementation. So I really appreciate this idea, and we at the LEG are more than willing to keep on providing support on this issue also, notably on helping the LDCs putting together a bankable project. Thank you very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, I now invite you to turn your attention to the next item of our program. My dear colleague and our former chair, Ms. Hannah Hamadallah Mohamed, will present to you the vision and priorities for support of the LEG and updates on strategic activities. Hannah, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, colleagues. Allow me to present to you the highlights of activities of the LEG for the next 2 years, and update on the progress of the rule of procedures mandated from COP26. We are blessed to present to you our LEG vision in supporting the LDCs on adaptation regarding the provision of support by the LEG and other actors of achieving demonstrable results, and also robust and good formulation and good quality of formulation of NAPs and implementation of actions identified in NAPs with the funding from GCFs and other source of fund. Existence of well-structured adaptation planning process in the LDCs. This vision encapsulates the core mandate of the LEG and provides a good framing for support to the LDCs. In support of our vision, the LEG identified key strategic activities which we would like to share with you. First, on addressing delays in producing NAP through direct country support. The LEG continue offering comprehensive support to the LDCs in formulating and implementing NAPs through the Open NAP initiative. The Open NAP initiative offer an opportunity for countries to hear national consultants and experts to assist them in drafting their NAPs. This is Open NAP initiatives also assist the LDCs in identifying obstacles and addressing these obstacles through targeted support, like data challenges or capacity gaps. The second activity in addressing issues of access to the GCF through the NAP writing workshops. The LEG facilitated the development and implementation of project proposal to improve the LDC's access to GCF resources through the NAP writing workshops. We conducted the NAP writing workshop for African LDCs in Nairobi in March, and we plan to hold the next one for Asia Pacific LDCs in July 11 to 14 July in Cambodia. The LEG is working closely with the LDCs in making a case to fast track the process of problem statement development and developing project idea. The next one is on launchings of the roster of LDC's NAP expert. The LEG also establishing a roster of national and regional experts from the LDCs, which will contain formation on experts with the relevant skills and professional expertise in climate change adaptation, who can contribute to the activities related to the formulation and implementation of NAPs. The expert will be made available to all those supporting NAPs in the LDCs to use to promote use of national available expert in delivering support. The LEG agreed to fully launch a call for the nomination of experts after this SBs. The third strategic area we want also to highlight in the addressing data challenges through the NAP data initiative. The motivation for this work emanates from the request of the LDCs to assist them in accessing data. The access to usable data, in particular climate scenario data, usually rank as high in gaps related to addressing adaptation and formulating NAPs. In addition to climate data, scenario data, there are numerous global and regional data sets that have been meticulously put together for various studies at the global. And also managing huge data set cumbersome, costly, and can be daunting when conducting assessment and preparing the NAP. So through the NAP data initiative, one of the modalities that the leg used, the leg through this NAP data initiative provide ready data set using open source statistical bucket. This result can be readily used by the LDCs in the formulating their NAPs and in developing also project portfolios. The leg continue to promote peer-to-peer learning through the NAP Expo. So we are happy that after 2 years, we will be able to provide this valuable space for the LDCs to learn from their peers. This NAP Expos, it promotes the exchange of experiences and fostering partnership between a wide range of actors and stakeholders on how to advance the work of the NAPs. This year, the NAP Expo will be held in August 22nd to 26th in Gaborone, Botswana. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank the government of Botswana for their offer to host this important event. The leg 41st start discussing the elements of the rule of procedure that mandated by the COP26. So we have identified the following elements which will be considered in more details are leg 42 regarding the membership, the officers, and the establishment and oversight of thematic working group, frequency, modalities, and location of leg meeting, agenda and documentation for the leg meetings, decision-making, participation of observers in leg meeting, means of communication, collaboration with the other UNFCCC constituent bodies and entities, engagement of other organizations and regional centers and network, overriding authority of the COP and the CMA. All these elements identified to be discussed and considered in details at leg 42nd. A subgroup was created for this particular work. The leg is accelerating. It is 20 years of adaptation support to the LDCs and watch out for outreach activities at the NAP Expo and at COP 27. So we would like to invite you to check out the recent product by the leg as you see in the screen. And for more information, please see the leg 41st report. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I will ask everyone to hold on to your question if you have any. So you will have the opportunity to raise any question very soon. So we have set up also a Slido to capture your question, and we will get to them later. Please follow the instruction on the screen. So pack your question there, and we will get to it later during the discussion. So the instruction display on the screen. So this is the number, the key number that you have to enter to the Slido to raise your question. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now go to our panel discussion, which will be focusing on addressing the formulation and implementation of NAPs. But before going to the panel, so once again, let me take this opportunity to thank our chair of the LDC group, Madeleine, for responding to our invitation, and also to Hannah for the presentation on the vision and updates on the work of the LEC. So thank to both of you, and yes,
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, for the first part, we'll have the update from the GCF and the Jeff. So they will provide updates on funding to the LDCs. We have 10 minutes for this segment. Okay, so sorry, ladies and gentlemen, for this slight delay. So we have a slight modification in our agenda. So the representative from the GCF is still in another meeting on the Glasgow Dialogue, but he will be joining us very soon. In the meantime, let's start with Doji from the Jeff. Doji will provide us the update from the Jeff. Please, Doji, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good to be here today. I'm given 5 minutes, I think, and I'll try to package a couple of key highlights since we had last session in Glasgow. There are two key messages I want to deliver here today. One is basically an update of what has happened on our front, and second, on the outlook of how we're thinking from our side for next 4 or 5 years. Apologies. So, yeah, just briefly, what has happened since our last meeting last time in Glasgow. Of course, we had this opportunity to provide updates at the 41st Lake meeting in March. We had 3 projects being approved at the total of about $20 million. And as of December, we were actually covering 94% of LDCs in last 3 years. Next, please. Now, what has happened very recently is that we are actually coming to a closure of our 8th period of the global environment. We call it Jeff replenishment period, but this does not apply to LDCF and SCCF in terms of the replenishment structure, but we still follow the same period. And this month is the last month of the Jeff 7. And in about 2 weeks' time, we are going to have a Jeff Council meeting, the 32nd Council meeting of LDCF and SCCF in Washington, D.C., and we are expected to approve 8 more additional projects. Now, what that makes in terms of the larger scheme of things is that we would be covering entire 47 LDCs with the support from LDCF. And focus has largely remained same in terms of nature-based agriculture, coastal management, but in this last work program, so as we speak, actually covers a little bit in terms of strategic, regional, and global initiatives as well. So this is what happened in last 6 months. Next, please. In terms of GF7 period, going back to sometime in the middle of 2018, we have somehow, we have had a large portfolio of projects in covering entire 47 countries. And in terms of financing, we've been able to cover 99 point, almost 100% of utilization. Next, please. Now, when we try to go back to last 20 years, so to speak, as long as, since the LDCF was conceived, we have provided coverage to a large number of projects, about $1.8 billion, and we have had a good number of multi-trust fund projects. Those are projects that not just stand by LDCF, but it's also being supported by other GF trust fund as well. Next, please. This is what has happened, but we are going to look at what is going to happen next. When we last briefed you and the lake, we were working to get 3 last remaining countries to give us a proposal. And they were Comoros, Madagascar, and Niger. And one of, 3 of the 8 proposals that's going to go to council later this month includes these 3 countries. We also had an opportunity to serve Tuvalu with the full allocated funding amount, as well as we worked with Zambia and Nepal to ensure that their allocations are taken, are being fully utilized. In terms of how we're looking at from here on, we have successfully adopted the new JEP strategy for adaptation on LDCF and SCCF. And this is going to be endorsed by council meeting again at end of this month. So I think this strategy is a pleasure for a JEF Secretariat to coordinate the work, but this has all come with the input from excellent contribution from both donors as well as recipient representatives. And we are going to actually have more discussions, and we are going to present this to LDC group in a couple of days' time. Just, if I have 1 minute just to capture the key highlights. Next, please. Basically, the structure, the strategy actually builds on from understanding of lots of gaps there is, and then there is an opportunity for transformational adaptation goal that's been started to discuss from today here. And most importantly, I think the new adaptation strategy is fully informed by science and the priorities of the recipient countries. And I know this, you had a long day. Probably it's not so much to keep in the, retained information here, but wanted to highlight that we still retain the 4 thematic areas that LDCF and SCCF would support going in JFED period. And next, please. And we have now moved into something called multi-year pledging. As you all know, that predictability of resources was a major issue with LDCF since JF6. There are a lot of pipelines of projects that we are not able to support with moving the resource mobilization modality towards a multi-year pledging. We see that this is going to not fully take care of everything, but I think it's gonna fill in a large issues with the predictability, as it will also maintain the options for countries to contribute voluntarily at their own pace while pledging to contribute on a multi-year basis. Next, please. In terms of scenarios, again, I think in JEF8 period, in accordance with the Glasgow Climate Pact, where we need to double the adaptation fund, JEF7, we had allocated each country about $10 million. So this is going to change to $20 million. And then we are actually allocating some resources for a challenge program, an innovative way of engaging agencies well beyond the 18GF agencies, and has helped us to think through catalyzing some of the major transformation work. We also have 10% global cap for global and regional projects. I think in GF7 we had a very successful global initiatives, and we wanted to continue with that. So basically the strategy negotiation has adopted two scenarios, one with $1 billion as a floor and other with $1.3 billion. We also have 3 other dedicated programs, which is to, I think this has come from both LDC as well as the donor partners, that there needs to be some visibility of the impacts and results being taken, brought about by LDCF. And similarly, we are going to have support dedicated for improving the planning and programming. I think this is coming up, I heard in a while ago as well. And then there is going to be some money set aside for organizational learning as well. I think that must be, this is my last slide. Thank you very much if I have taken more than what I was allocated for. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dolji. Very detailed and informative presentation. We're still waiting for a colleague from the GCF. But for the sake of time, what we will do, so we will go to our next panel, and when he arrives, so we will give him the opportunity to share the update from the GCF. That being said, our next panel segment will put a spotlight on country reflection on success stories, experience and challenge with the formulation and implementation of NAPS. We will be joined by Mr. John Kana of Liberia and Ms. Justina Bello from Timor-Leste. Please. Thank you, Mr. Kana, and also thanks, Ms. Bello. My first question is directed to Mr. John Kana of Liberia. So Liberia is one of the first LDCs to access funding from the GCF. Could you please share some lessons on this experience? Are there any challenges? So please feel free to share the challenges that you face in trying to access GCF funding with the participants. So some representative of the LDCs are there so they can benefit of your experience.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thanks to the organizer for giving Liberia the opportunity to share a reflection on the support Liberia received to build its adaptive capacity. So in terms of challenges, first of all, Liberia received its first support from the GCF in 2015. And but then the EPA that is responsible for the environment and climate-related issues, there were challenges when it comes to human resource capacity, especially wherein we had limited human resource in responding to GCF proposal. And so what our country did at the time was to look outside, and we hired some international consultant that helped our country to actually respond to GCF proposal at the time, and at the same time try to build in-house capacity for Liberia. So our first GCF funding was in 2015, and it was around 2.3 million towards our development of our national adaptation plan. And that support came at the right time because at the time we were also developing our intended nationally determined contribution as well. And so the support was to help strengthen our institutional capacity because the EPA came into being in 2003, just after the war, and actually the war ended in 2004, and then we had to go for election in 2006. And so there were issue of capacity gap, like I said. There were sectors, even within the sectors or among the sectors, there was still issue of capacity gap on how the different sector could be able to respond to GCF funding. So the support we received in 2015 was to build and strengthen capacity, institutional capacity, even the EPA own capacity at the time, and which we did. And also we wanted to look at, to expand knowledge base for scaling up adaptation in Liberia. So that funding also helped us to do that, wherein we needed to have the rightful human resource capacity when it comes to the issue of climate change adaptation. And also we helped to build capacity for mainstreaming climate change adaptation into planning, budgeting, processes, and system. And so that funding also helped Liberia to achieve that. And as we speak, even with the newly updated NDC of Liberia, because of the NAP, the support that we receive, we're able now to have the local capacity that we needed to update our NDC. So those are some of the success stories that we can say from our first GCF support. And also we wanted to make sure that we have to formulate financial mechanism for scaling up adaptation, including the public and private sector and national institutions. So the funding we received, we were able to build institutional capacity. We sent about 12 staff from different non-ministry and agency to go for training in climate-related areas where they gain knowledge, and now they are in country. We also used that funding to set up for the first time in Liberia a program on climate change and biodiversity at the University of Liberia. And this year we had our first set of graduates, and now we are also expecting to take in new students because of that particular support that we received from GCF. Also, our national disaster management agency, because when it came into being in 2017, there were challenges on human resource as well. And so we used part of the funding to be able to train our staff within that institution to be able to take up, to understand the issue of hazards, from climate hazards. And so we sent them also to Israel, and then they were trained. Currently, as we speak, we also were able to receive another support from GCF in the tune of 17 million, and the total package is 23 because of the income contribution of the government. And that project is called the Monrovia Metropolitan Project, which is mainly focused on the coastal area. And so that project, as we speak, it is being implemented nationally by the EPA because of the kind of capacity that we're able to build. So we in collaboration with UNDP, we now have the project implementation unit within the EPA that is seated and is now steering the affairs of implementing the project, the Monrovia Metropolitan Project. And the focus of that project is basically to foster and improve coastal management and present local communities with diverse climate resilient livelihoods. And the project intends to benefit about 250,000 people directly. And then indirectly, it will also benefit about 1.5 million people through a transformative climate risk-informed integrated coastal zone management approach for the country. And so there where we are, And we also, we are in talk with Jeff. I can remember the last time when we met in Nairobi, our country was able to develop 2 project ideas, and one of them is to do climate smart agriculture, and we are working with the LEG group to be able to develop that project idea further, so that we can seek support from GCF as well. And so Jeff is supporting one of the projects that we presented in Nairobi currently for Sino County, Greenville, because from our climate risks and vulnerability assessment, we know that the coastal area is highly vulnerable to climate change. And so we're going to be receiving another set of funding from Jeff and in the coming years or so. So I will stop here and then give my colleague the opportunity to be able to come in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, John. Please, ladies and gentlemen, join me in giving a big shout out to Liberia for these good experiences. For Ms. Justina Bello of Timor-Leste, your country is one of the 14 LDCs that have submitted a NAP. It will be then interesting to hear your experience in transitioning to implementation phase. What lesson can we learn from Timor-Leste?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the platform for us to Timor-Leste to share its experience in implementation of its NAP. For now, at the moment, Timor-Leste, the implementation is not much, but right now the Secretary of State for the Environment, through the National Climate Change Directorate, is formulating climate change decree law, which is supported by the European Union. And at the same time, we are formulating the proposal to access the GCF readiness to develop a national climate change strategic action plan in order to guide the implementation of the sectoral priorities that that are already been defined under our initial NAP. And the National Climate Change Directorate also already formulated a proposal, already proposed to access the GCF readiness in order to implement and revise our initial NAP, the current NAP, by considering the existing data that we have, because the initial NAP that we have was basing on the earlier data from the National Communication and other related secondary data. So under this current proposal, we need to implement some of the NAP priorities and upgrade the initial NAP based on the current vulnerability assessment data. So, also to share that in order to ensure direct access of the fund, the National Climate Change Directorate under the Secretary of State for Environment is the implementing partners for this project. Yeah, that's all what I can share from Timor-Leste's reflection.
Thank you very much, Justina, for indeed your active engagement. And we now go to part 3 of our panel discussion. But let me once again congratulate both Liberia and also Timor-Leste for their important efforts in terms of NAP formulation and adaptation implementation. So once again, thank you very much. So, as I said, we now go to part 3 of our panel discussion. And please allow me to introduce our friends who will speak on the approaches for implementing adaptation projects and programs. We have Julia Wolf from FAO. Can I see Julia? Over there in the back. Alvin Chanda from UNEP and Sophie de Koning from UNCDF. Please join me in the front. So, ladies and gentlemen, please don't forget to put your question on the Slido. We ask the Secretariat, Julie, could you please display again the information Slido with the reference number so the participant can know how to access it. Okay, so this is the information. So for those of you who just join us, this is the information for the Slido where you can raise your question or put your comments. So once again, thank you, Julia. Thank you, Alvin, and thank you, Sophie. So to our speakers, could you briefly share with us your experience and current approaches in implementing projects and programs? So I will start first with Julia. Julia, you have the floor, please.
Thank you. So just to make clear, we only have 3 minutes, so I will be very quick. So let me start by saying thanks so much for this invitation. I really, really look always forward to meeting the LAG group because for me, it's one of the group that keep things together. No? I mean, it's 20 years. Last year was the birthday. And it's a really critical group to have this bold and open discussion and share. And I really like the way, you know, like to how Liberia presented on what are the key constraints. We also hear and love to hear what works well, but I think it's really that the compliment I want to do to this group and also the important sharing on the key gaps and needs and how we can move forward as a community with our different roles. FAO has been following the LAG for 20 years, I would say, starting with NAPAS and then moving to NAPS support. I don't have numbers for you here, but we are really a dedicated ally, let's say. We have been at the normative level working on sectoral guidelines, starting on the very important UNFCCC technical guidelines, and then trying to give it like a sectoral lens. So you've seen that, no? So that includes genetic resources, agriculture, forestry, fisheries. And we're always happy to receive feedback. We had of course, we have a whole GEF and GCF portfolio of dedicated support, but one of the two key programs we actually did with UNDP, and my colleague Ruhini is here. So we had the NAP-AG program where we supported 4 LDCs, so that was Gambia, Uganda, Nepal, and Zambia, and now we have a new program that started last year where we have 5 LDCs, which is Cambodia, Ethiopia, Nepal, Senegal, and Uganda. And overall, we support many countries as possible. So I've prepared 5 key messages. So, and that's just like a short list of many learnings, I guess. And let me start with also really noting this innovative next step on proposing the NAP data sets, which I just saw in your work plan. And it's actually one of my key lessons coming out of the implementation, because there's so much information available and we really lose kind of the information. Often it's like even like sub-regional vulnerability assessment. So I think the community, the partners, and we always tried that, but we need to still step up working with the countries, with national institutions on bringing together the data sets available, and that includes, of course, risk vulnerability analysis, but also climate projections and really looking at it across the sector, right? And let's look at water. No? So water is a very important asset for different sectors. So that's really key. And I think a lot of projects have it, but it would be good to also look at more detailed lessons learned on how we can even, oops, that's 3 minutes, how we can even increase in this kind of synergetic way of using data. The second, now I have to speed up, is building on existing activities. Again, something where we really need to work as partners. There have been a lot of competition between agencies, I also have to say, so that's something we have to overcome, and where you countries have to challenge us, where you have to be a partner in crime and saying, okay, guys, transparency is like who's doing what. Now, often it's really hard to find that information, but it's also building on existing means, and I was very pleased to hear the second speaker saying the nexus between NAP and NDCs, right? This is really key. There are different instruments, and they need to inform each other and kind of build on that. Third lessons, creating alliance and building trust. That's what we've been trying to do, in particular with UNDP, because we realize that in many cases, the ag-related ministries have been not so much on the mainstream. They have been like sidelined a little bit. So our programs always try to bridge that, and with kind of different levels of difficulties, but it's really important where this trust building happens. Fourth lesson is inclusiveness, something we're still struggling with, it's interesting that the Food System Summit and the agri-food system, now FAO speaks about agri-food systems, actually says there's a lot of more actors in the play, right? So that means indigenous peoples, women, youth, etc. So the NAP is a marvelous instrument to group all these stakeholders with the needs and gaps around that. And I guess that has been more or less successful in countries, but it's also something where we can exchange more. What is the mechanism? Because it's a cost item as well. No? Inclusiveness has a cost, and that's kind of limiting. Last item is starting planning with thinking finance, I called it, because what we realized that even some of the shortcomings of the closed project, the NAP-AG, for example, in the case of Uganda, no? We had like this amazing design, there's a plan out, but then the financing is missing. So this is where not like the discussion with Jeff, GCF, but it's also where domestic finance comes into play. And the last argument is the private sector. And now I have a little announcement, and then I would conclude. So in this new Scala program, where we support 5 LDCs, we created a pilot facility to support additional 5 countries this year. And the information Rohini shared in the last LEC meeting, we called it a private sector engagement facility, which is support for the governments to work with the private sector. So it's not money going to the private sector, it's working with the private sector. And we started as a pilot. We will provide information on slides on how countries can apply. It's only 5, it's a pilot. If it's successful, maybe we can stock it up. So help us, be interested, engaged. The call has been sent out to your country representatives, to UNFC. So whoever is the UNFC focal point, so I'm so sorry, that should be silent, is kind of, our best partner. Rohini is here as well. So UNDP will operationalize that at the country level, if I may say that. FAO plays a technical role, and we look forward to this new experience, and we really think let's really try to figure out how to best work with the private sector. And that's also domestic private sector. No, the multinationals, that's a very difficult matter sometimes. So it's really trying to get something national and local going. Thanks so much. I hope that was interesting.
Thank you very much, Julia. In fact, a big shout out to Julia, even though that the chronometer sounds 2 times. Okay, so Alvin, it's your turn. Could you please share with us your experience in implementing climate change projects and programs, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is our second panel today, and this is my 4th one today, so I'll try my very best to be concise and to the point. I've been asked to talk about experiences in terms of implementing adaptation projects from UNEP's portfolio, but at the same time talk about challenges on the ground. One of the big things at UNEP we are finding is that the adaptation finance is still quite low. And in fact, when you factor in the climate the risks and scenarios, you are basically looking at doubling of adaptation finance. So by 2030, we are looking at in the upper range of somewhere between 140 to 300 billion. This is a substantial cost, to countries, but also resources to mobilize. One of the big challenges for countries is that they are still facing quite huge challenges in terms of accessing adaptation finance. If anything, adaptation finance is about 19%, mostly flowing through public sector. What we do working as an accredited entity to the GCF and implementing partner to GEF, as well as Adaptation Fund, we do find working with countries it is extremely challenging to mobilize funds, particularly because of legal operational issues, and the gestation period for some of these projects can take up to good 3.5 years. Having said that, I mean, if we deep down into the key challenges, they also relate to access to climate data. I want to speak with a couple of examples. So Timor-Leste had a key challenge was accessing climate-specific information in country. One of the first few projects we worked with Timor and partnered with IFRC WMO was developing an early warning systems program funded by the GCF. A similar approach has been trialed also for 5 Pacific countries. This is a key project in terms of not only developing capacity for early warning systems and climate services, but also providing the downscaled information. Similarly, in national adaptation programs, what we find is that we did a stock take of the key challenges of the national adaptation programs we support, and UNEP supports more than 20 countries with national adaptation plans. The availability of downscale climate information, particularly relating climate information to impacts and risks, and also communication of risk, this is very challenging. So most of the national adaptation programs, they look at developing downscale climate information, which is sector specific. So in Nepal, the NAP has developed downscaled climate information for 9 provinces. Similar approach is being used in Dominica, in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, they are looking at sector-specific climate information. So, these are some of the good practices in terms of mobilizing resources. While this is happening, of course, adaptation being there, we are finding that countries are, and particularly vulnerable countries from the LDC group, where climate risks have taken a pace and a toll. So adaptation in activities are in fact happening in the context of increasing vulnerability and also resulting impacts of loss and damage. Just as an example, Madagascar has had back-to-back climate events. So a long-term drought followed by a series of storms in the midst of COVID. One of the key challenges over there has been, the project had to come to a halt. It was a readiness climate project. Simply because of COVID, we couldn't really have face-to-face workshops. Practical logistics of just implementing projects in country has been very, very challenging. So this project had to come to a stop. And I think, from a donor perspective or from a implementing perspective, we've got to be a little bit realistic in terms of the context and the realities of implementing projects while climate vulnerability and risks are increasing. We have similar cases in Haiti and also in Honduras. So it is extremely challenging, in some country context to actually implement these projects. And my last point, Chair, would be on engagement of private sector, particularly in the adaptation space. It has been extremely challenging. We find that adaptation in least developed countries and in vulnerable countries and regions in Africa. And since the diversity of the lens of private sector is quite wide, you're looking at small to micro and medium-sized private sector who generally don't have the capacity to engage in terms of adaptation. And there we have to start from the very basic of building an awareness on adaptation initiatives. So being cognizant of approaches where we're looking at private sector engagement, I think that's one of the real perspective. If you're working in SIDS in LDCs, there's a huge diversity of private sector which may not actually have that kind of interest or the capacity, and you've got to start from ground zero on that. I'll stop over there and perhaps over to you, Chair, and I'll take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alvin. Very interesting experience. So let's applaud Alvin. So, Sophie, now you have the opportunity to share with us your experience.
Thank you, Kenel. Yes, so I'd like to share some experience of the countries we work with under the local climate adaptive living facility and its mechanism. So that initiative is now over 10 years old. It started in Bhutan and Cambodia, and there are now 32 countries engaged, most of them LDCs, 26 LDCs. So this particular approach is actually addressing essentially the local climate responses using country systems. So essentially it's addressing the vertical integration of the NDC and the NAP. And with the NDC, it's largely adaptation, however, with also mitigation co-benefits. So as we work with countries, we help them put in place a mechanism that is tailored to their country systems in terms of decentralization landscape, but also the climate-related strategies, NDCs and NAP, channeling the funds through their own systems, using their own planning and budgeting at the local level to select the investment from year to year, and then being assessed in terms of performance, feeding back also, therefore, in the reporting and possibly also the reporting of the NDC. So it's really that niche of vertical integration. So one particular challenge, in fact, is that those climate strategies document often don't take the local level as, in full. So there might be consultations with with districts, with regions, but decentralization is not considered a sector as such to deliver on DC and the NAP. So that's kind of a regular gap, although we do work with a number of countries to sometimes ex post or through the implementation plan to somehow catch up with that. But that's a kind of recurrent pattern that we see, which somehow there doesn't enable to fully tap into the opportunity to work with local governments on implementing the NDC and the NAP. Now, another possible challenge is indeed the access to finance. So UNCDF is not accredited itself to GCF or adaptation fund. So it means that we actually work really with countries for their own direct access. So it makes, somehow it gives us the opportunity to really somehow experience possibly what the countries go through as we accompany them. So we do work with countries on their accreditation to Green Climate Fund or Adaptation Fund. So we are now working with 6 of them, 3 succeeded. Sometimes they then go to the other fund to kind of fast track another accreditation. That is, of course, as we all know, a very lengthy process. But then comes the access to the fund for the project. Some countries, after they get accredited, somehow it looks they don't have the energy to go for a concept or funding proposal. So there, as we somehow offer support from A to Z, really ensuring them that if it takes 4 years, we'll be there for 4 years, then they engage. At this point, we work with 14 countries in direct access, concept note, and proposal for an amount of 185 million. So the size, of course, of the project at some point is also a constraint for countries to go to scale using those type of approaches. Maybe a third point would be also related to the fact that largely climate finance is organized by sectors and organized by projects. So somehow if a country comes with a proposal that is more using its own country system, and when it comes to the local planning, budgeting, it's multi-sector in essence. So local development is multi-sectoral, so it doesn't quite fit nicely in a box of a sector, which might be the reading of some of the climate funds at this point. Likewise, it's a project, possibly from a funding perspective at the source of funding, but then it's deployed through country systems using the intergovernmental fiscal transfer system, the local planning and budgeting. And there as well, there is a lot of dialogue somehow to translate a project into that so that both parties feel comfortable and we don't projectize what is essentially can be delivered, should be delivered through a country system. So those are some of the points, the data always, even when it's available. The other day it was with a country in West Africa, an LDC, and to buy the data which existed, it was 320,000 just to buy it, because it was said to be a national heritage. But of course, you know, the climate is, you know, a national emergency. So even when the data exists, that's still a challenge for countries to access and use it, and then use it to the level appropriate. On the good side, we see a very good level of ownership for this kind of, you know, maybe different way or complementary of delivering climate finance for local solutions. The national government, you know, sees it as a way to deliver indeed on their NDCs and NAV and report. At the local government level, they can use their own planning, budgeting. It diminishes the transaction cost for them. It's effective, and it builds the capacities at the same time. And at the community level, they can contribute to both the planning, implementation, reporting. So it's really very much owned. So 322 local governments have used this system across 17 countries. 15 more are preparing. So we see a high demand, again, to complement other project approaches by really ensuring a change of country systems to factor adaptation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Experience that you share with us on related to data. So thank to Alvin, thanks to Julia, and once again, thanks to Sophie for your active engagement in the fight against climate change, in helping notably the LDCs facing this very challenging issue. Thanks again. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will have, as I mentioned at the beginning of the event, Q&A part for this event. But before we go to the Q&A part, let me quickly present my fellow leg member who are in the room with us. Please, colleague from the leg member colleagues, please stand up just so the participant can see the different faces. So we have Anna in the front, we have Franz, we have Adao, Amina, and Gabriel in the back. So we'll now move to the Q&A part, and unfortunately, we only have a bit less than 10 minutes for this part. And I will ask my colleague, Franz, to moderate this Q&A session. Please, Franz, you can come here in the front. Do we have a mic, a mobile mic?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Mguna Franz, but not from France. So I'm 100% LDC.
Yeah, but I'm not connected to Slide.
I'm given this privilege to moderate the question and answer session on behalf of the chair. So we have about 11 minutes. So I will take 3 hands of questions, and then I will let the respondents to respond. Let's be straight to the point and be brief. I have my own questions, and I could ask them first because I have the privilege of being the moderator. Can I see the hands of, but I will not ask. Can I see the hands of those who have questions? I still note we have other questions there on the online. 3 hands. Okay. We have 1, 2, 3.
We have one hand in the back.
Okay. You can go.
Thank you very much. I think.
Please introduce yourself, your name, and the country or organization you are coming from when you ask a question.
Yeah, I am Kamrul Choudhury from Bangladesh. Today is the 20th anniversary of Least Developed Country Expert Group. I was privileged to negotiate at that point of time the creation of LEG in this process under UNFCCC. And I recollect that our first share of least developed country, Mama Konate from Mali, who has passed away. And also another former share, Muhammad Riazuddin of Bangladesh, who has also passed away just 2 years back. So I remember them because for them we have had creation of least developed country expert group at that point of time in history. But my question now is, we have said more relevance of LEG now because adaptation requirements, needs of the least developed countries is now manifold, not one-fold, not double, not quadruple. It is manifold. So, and least developed countries are still least capacitated. So they require, especially now, backup service from technical service, support from least developed country expert group, especially in terms of how best they can access enough, say, priority programs, because many countries have already prepared national adaptation plan in least developed countries. So they do need fast-track finance for implementation of like NAF programs. For that, you need to provide that technical support, especially how to say write project proposals, so that GCF project, LDCF project, or say can access adaptation fund program, and also ZEF program, UNDP program, or say FAO program, quite readily, quite say smoothly. So that would be my say humble submission.
Thank you for your question. I would ask colleagues to be brief, direct to the question, so that we don't take a lot of time explaining. You have the floor, and then Ma'am will follow. 2 of you. Oh, the mic.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Susan. Thank you for so informative presentation. I am going to be brief. Go ahead to my question. As you know, the adverse climate condition is affected mostly the vulnerable people and local people. I'm asking about the windows and channels to support these vulnerable people as grassroots organization and local communities. How can they access to give finance and other climate change finance? Because we need a lot of capacity building and awareness setting for these communities to have access to this finance. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm Susan Abdullah from Sudan, following gender issues. I'm asking how the LEG consider gender issue in her work and as one of the constituted bodies. As we know that in the Gender Action Plan, that the constituted bodies to be coherent with this gender issue and how this, I'm asking them. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Can I maybe ask the presenters to respond to the questions? Some questions go to the leg, and I think others to the panelists who were presenting here. Anyone to respond?
Yes, very quickly. Yeah, I think one of the question goes to Jeff with respect to vulnerable community and people. How you at the Jeff facilitate access of these vulnerable groups to finance, and also I think maybe UNCDF and UNEP maybe might want to provide some reflection and some answer on that. Yes, please, Dorji.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this wonderful question. I will just speak about the outlook from here on, how we are looking at it. Obviously, this is coming from building 20 years of experience of implementing LDCF projects in LDCs, and this has obviously contributed a lot in reducing the vulnerabilities and strengthening resilience in LDC communities. Looking forward, I think we fully understand the challenges that LDCs has in accessing funds such as LDCF, but I can say that I think LDCs are quite aware of the process that goes in applying the, submitting the proposal to Jeff for LDCF. And for our outlook, what we have is we are actually, that's why, creating a dedicated program that's specifically looking at upstreaming engagement with countries in trying to help in capacity building, outreach, so that way it would simplify further in terms of understanding the key requirement in terms of project proposal. I can also briefly speak in terms of inclusion agenda. I think we understand that vulnerability is very important, and I think we consider partnership and inclusion as a core element going forward. This is because I think in 20 years of our experience, investment needs to be sustainable and durable, and one way to do that is to empower our local vulnerable communities, not just as a recipient of the fund, but also as a member trying to make decisions for ourselves. So in that perspective, I think we have taken on board all the key issues that needs to be renewed in terms of focus. Thank you.
Thank you, Dosh.
Yes, maybe I can complement. Like Kenneth proposed, so on that issue of accessing the funds for the very local level, communities, or from maybe one things to consider is to aggregate the needs. I know it's easier, maybe it's easier said than done, but if that is a kind of recurrent needs, which is likely to be the case in a country that, communities, obviously needs to be engaged and benefit from the climate finance. I mean, there are different possible delivery mechanisms, possibly through network of CSOs. That could be one way to look at it. And from the experience we have with helping countries setting up this local climate adaptive living facility, there we use the country systems under the leadership of government to channel the finance to the local governments, and then from there the local government is to use it together with the communities in terms of planning, selecting the investment, and then there is this accountability dimension to it where the communities can hold their local governments accountable. So depending on the country setup, there are different options, I think, but aggregating the needs so that a project can be put in place and then shared with various sources of finance, because the other issue is the sequencing of aid. Projects are typically 4 or 5 years, but adaptation is there to stay. So if the approach that is developed can then be somehow supported by a range of partners, maybe with different geographical focus or different perspective or deepening through time, that could be a way to then sustain the efforts for more than a project cycle. Thank you.
You want to add?
Sophie.
Yeah, very quickly, I just wanted to comment on what Sophie has said. So one of the key barriers to access is getting an accreditation as well. And with the support of GCF, UNEP has partnered on readiness to support countries get and seek accreditation. So that's one of the ways countries have been and partners have been able to access funds. The second thing is that I've just moved into a new role where I oversee the Global Adaptation Network. And through the Global Adaptation Network, we've partnered with faith-based organizations, community-based organizations that gain a lot of experience from countries that have access to adaptation finance. So that's another way. We do have a global EBA fund, and that's primarily targeted for community-based partners together with IUCN. So, these are a range of experiences through which they can access, but also gain experiences on adaptation fund.
Thank you. Okay, I think I wanted to take the last round of questions, but we have the presenter we have been waiting for. I think we should stop with the Q&A and then proceed with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our friends, for moderating this Q&A session, and thanks to all the participants and also to the representative from the organization for providing a very good answer to the question that have been raised. So without further ado, let me give the floor to the GCF representative, Juan, to provide some updates on GCF.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and my sincere apologies to everyone. We were in the loss and damage financing discussions and had to come in late. So I know that we're already past the time, but of course, having already heard from some of the experiences, particularly, it's always good to hear of the experiences of countries in what is actually happening and the experiences and the challenges that are being faced. I think that I will be able to fast track a little bit on my presentation. So let me move over here. So let me give you a snapshot of where we are right now. So the GCF, we are now in the process of closing our programming cycle for the current trust fund. We will be launching, or we're just about to launch the replenishment process for what will be the new trust fund. And in this current trust fund, programming for LDCs has been a core priority. I'm not going to go right now too much into how we have done that, but rather give you some of the current figures. And I want to close off today with what is some of the key challenges and where we are on the key issue of financing implementation. So we can go to the next slide. So this is where the current portfolio, of course, as a whole for the GCF is. And let me actually go to the LDC one, which is, of course, the one that I want to focus on today. The next slide, yeah. So this is where we currently are in programming under this, up to the point of this trust fund. So it's been $3 billion that have been programmed in support of least developed countries, which comes to a total of 6.2 once considered co-financing. And of course, these figures are only, they're not really representative of taking the outputs that have been part of the NAPS process. We're only at the stage, and I will go to that in just a moment, where we are right now with the actual implementation of all these things that are now being the fruit of the many years of work under the NAP formulation process. Next slide. So most importantly, perhaps at this moment, because we know that this is a very important issue for LDCs, it's readiness support. At this particular stage, we continue to, of course, increase the support available, but most importantly, we have been trying to deploy a few solutions to try to address some of the concerns that we keep hearing from LDCs. So some of these have to do the application of advisory support services so that LDCs LDCs have further support. Some of this, of course, as has been mentioned, as part of the collaboration with the LEG, has been the partnership that we have had with the LEG for the last few years, trying to also identify support candidates for direct access entities from LDCs and try to sort of do a little bit more hand-holding. And of course, up to now, one very important tool has been the regional dialogues. The regional dialogues being the space where we can actually sit with countries and be able to talk through some of these issues. And of course, these tend to be regional. We actually haven't had one for LDCs targeted as such. We are now in the process of organizing some of our activities for the remaining of the year. Next. Now, in terms of the NAP pipeline, at this moment, most LDCs have access NAP support, and a good number of them, or the remaining, do have a NAP support in the pipeline. Only 7 LDCs have not submitted a NAP proposal as of yet. Now, this comes for a total envelope value of $253 million that have been secure for this is only for NAP formulation, of course, very different from the actual implementation itself. We can go to the next slide. So now this is perhaps where I wanted to stop, and it would have been, of course, helpful to have this, some of these reflections earlier, is that now that a lot of countries are coming to this question of, so what do you do now that you are coming to the end of your NAP formulation process, is that as we begin to unpack what are some of the outputs that are in the NAPs, we're finding that, of course, there's still activities that can be further supported through readiness. Some of these have to do still with doing enabling type of, the creation of enabling frameworks. They don't necessarily need to be put into a larger funding proposal so that we can really prioritize and really be able to provide that secure allocation of up to $1 million that LDCs can have every year. Of that support, of course, not needless to say, this is only for the type of enabling activities, but PPF remains a tool that we want to target with more expediency. We just recently have also, as of 2 weeks ago, done further revisions and revised the simplified approval process to increase, to go from $10 million, which is what we used to have before, now up to $25 million, and making some changes in some of the steps. But this is, of course, to say that there's still quite a lot of work to do around this question of now implementing NAPs, and a question that we look forward to continue to collaborate with the LEG in how we answer it. I'll stop there for now, and of course happy to answer questions, mindful that I'm getting in the way of your dinner.
Yeah, thank you very much. John, for these very concise but detailed and precise information. So thanks for that. I know that we had some question on Slido, so the Secretariat will provide answer to the question on Slido. But I will give the opportunity to one participant who has his hand to ask a question in the back of the room. So please raise the question. Franz, give him the opportunity to raise a question. Yes, please. I think it's a burning one, isn't it?
Questions on finance are always burning, especially when it comes to LDCs. Actually, my question was to Doji, but since it's all about financing, I'll try to direct it at both Doji and Juan. Two things. The first one is about the support to coming up with is support for readiness. My key highlight on that would be whether support for readiness will also translate in support for helping, for example, LDCs implement some of those medium actions or long-term actions that they're trying to come up with for building resilience, or implement any of those actions that we postulate to take forward in terms of implementation. But on the other hand is the issue of mobilizing resources at scale. We realize that I think increasingly there's increasingly too much interest, especially among the LDCs, in formulating concrete adaptation actions or plans that we wish to advance. Even when you look at our NDCs, you can even remember that we have even there's even an introduction about adaptation communications as a component of that, which is dear to our hearts. So what is the possibility of, for example, supporting LDCs to effectively not just access those finances as it is, but also support in the direct implementation of actions as enlisted? Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for raising this question. Yeah, let's give the chance to Doji to answer first, and after that we go to the GCF, please.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you very much for this wonderful question. Again, I think this is something that we get opportunity to clarify. The thing with executing project by national entity, that's our #1 priority. We always encourage countries to implement, execute the activities of the project. The way in which we deliver our support as of now is that we have implementing agencies called JEF implementing agencies. They are responsible to and accountable on how the money is used in the country to the JEF. But we have never encouraged JEF agencies to be executing the projects as well. In fact, that's the conflict of interest for us. So that's why we wanted to make sure that, in a very exceptional circumstances, if the same JEF agencies wanted to execute the projects, there needs to have a proper firewall system put in place. Unless such system is put in place, we always encourage the national agencies to execute. And that's how we are actually charting ourselves going forward as well. And specifically in our strategy documents, which is, by the way, developed in an intensive consultations with a number of stakeholders, some sitting here today. And the way in which we are organizing ourselves in there is that we are going to give them specific attentions to the national agencies and going to the level of the local level, because we understand that locally led climate action is going to be very effective going forward to bring it up to the scale again. And that's how we think that's going to help. And happy to answer any questions, but this is something, thank you for the opportunity for us to clarify this.
Thank you very much, Dorji. Juan?
Sure. So I think first and foremost it's important in the context of GCF to stress that we, as a model, we believe in being a partnership-driven organization. We have over 100 partners, and we think that it's very important that basically countries take a sort of fit-for-purpose approach to who they work with, because that will enable them to be able to leverage who makes the most sense. And who addresses their needs at the best, who works in the region, etc. And so this is a strength that we continue to value and that we hope that can be put at the service of countries. Of course, having said that, I mean the commitment and therefore this also helps countries to engage in this question of mobilizing a scale, because you can engage in diversity of partners, and it might make the more sense that you pick one partner to work on your sort of grant-based instruments versus other partners that are really sort of much better suited at working with other instruments. And in this diversity, we see that there's some strength. So I think perhaps I will leave it at that. Hopefully, of course, happy to sort of take it offline, but if that's okay with you, Chair.
Yes. Thank you very much, Juan, and thank also to Dorji. So the Secretariat will provide, as I mentioned before, answer to the question was on Slido. So please consult the Secretariat website for answer to your questions. we now come to an end of the event, but before we end the event, I want to thank also the organization that haven't the chance to present update on their work. So I thank UNDP for their continued support to the work of the lake. We also thank the EU and all other representatives for the organization in the room. So thanks for your continued support to the work of the lake. So that have been very valuable support to our group. So thanks for that. So ladies and gentlemen, we would like to thank everyone for being with us today and for always standing ready to support the LDCs in their work on adaptation. We wish you a very, very good and pleasant evening. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Libanese.